Welcome to the Veganuary podcast, the podcast that helps you to try a vegan diet. It's stuffed full of hints and tips for vegans and veg-curious people. Haven't learnt it off by heart yet, Wendy. I'm still reading it from a piece of paper. I wonder if by episode 5 I'll just have it.
Yeah, I think so.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm good. Have you got a most vegan thing that's happened to you this week?
You know, Stu, I was a completely average vegan this week. I have no most and no least vegan things that I have thought of to share with you.
Well, let down.
Yeah. What do you got for me?
Do you know, I've been learning a bit about the history of the animal rights movement. So we had someone come and give a presentation to the Veganuary team. His name was Kim Stallwood, and he's been a vegan activist, I think, since the 70s. And he did a talk about the history of animal rights activism and the animal rights movement and animal rights philosophy. And it was really interesting. I learned a lot because actually, even though I am a professional vegan, which is how I like to describe myself sometimes, I am a bit ignorant about that kind of history. So it was really interesting to me.
Yeah, he was fantastic. I learned a lot.
Well, as you can possibly tell, Wendy and I are struggling a little bit to always think of these things week in, week out. So we'd love to hear some suggestions from you, our listeners. So if you can tell us about like a really vegan thing or a not very vegan thing that's happened to you, email us at podcast@veganuary.com. Are you a very sporty person, Wendy?
I would consider myself a fairly sporty person. But why I think this is such a fun topic for you and I is that the first time we met, it was cycling across India together.
Correct.
We did a Veganuary fundraiser. And we spent about 2 weeks cycling. So we have a sporty history.
Can you remember how many miles we did, Wendy?
You know, I might be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure it was 250 a week. So 500 all in. Does that sound insane? Am I misremembering it?
I think it felt insane. So, I mean, and it was hilly. It was big hills. We felt really proud. We were very proud of ourselves. So yeah, but what about on your daily, weekly life, normal life?
Yeah, so I would say most mornings I do a little bit of strength training before I sit down at the desk for the day, and then at the end of the workday, I tend to go for a long walk or a run. So that's kind of my daily habits. But then, you know, for fun, I play on a local soccer team. That's football for our friends across the pond. Yeah. And I love to hike. And I am on the East Coast now, so I don't get to do it much, but I really love to surf.
Brill. I don't think I knew you were in a soccer team, unless I've forgotten.
Yeah.
I feel that I am not a naturally sporty or fit person. So until my mid-20s, I would say I did almost no exercise ever. and then around my mid-20s, I decided to change that. But I've run marathons, I've done triathlons, I did the thing in India together. But I still don't think of myself as like a sporty person, even though probably by most people's standards I am.
Yeah, I think you've earned your sporty person card.
Yeah.
You've run a marathon. You've cycled 500 miles.
I know. I think deep down inside, I'm still like a little chubby teenager. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of flip between things. I get quite bored of doing certain exercises. So I flip between things. So I did running for a while and cycling and swimming. So at the moment I'm into strength training and going to the gym, and I'm trying to build up a bit of muscle. So that's where I am.
It's interesting. It seems you're a challenge motivated person in general, right? You're drawn to the Veganuary model, to the run a marathon, to the big cycling trip, like the contained challenge is a motivator.
I think I am, actually. I think I like having something to work towards. And I like the structure. I love the structure of following a training plan. It really appeals to me. Yeah.
And I suppose, you've done some fairly large athletic feats there, so you probably have a lot to say about training plans. What are some of your tips for fueling sports performance as a vegan?
Yes. Well, I think it's easy to overthink this actually, and I think you kind of apply the same rules that you would to a non-vegan diet. So you need to make sure you're getting enough calories to fuel your exercise. So I would recommend getting an app where you can track your calorie intake, and usually these apps kind of allow you to set a target depending on what kind of training you're doing. So I know I'm using an app called MyFitnessPal, and I can put into there that I'm aiming to build muscle, and it gives me a kind of target protein, carbohydrate, fat ratio for the day, which I find really helpful. They're a bit cumbersome to like fill in every day. That's the only thing I find, but I kind of do it. I kind of do it for a week every so often, just because I tend to eat the same sort of things every week. So it just gives me a kind of flavor of what my intake is. And then I suppose if you're trying to build muscle, you do need to be aware of getting more protein. But we've talked before in this podcast about how people are often people often think they need more protein than they actually do. Obviously, if you try and build muscle, you do need to have more protein to your diet. But also, people don't realize quite how much protein is available from a plant-based diet. So things like pulses and beans and tofu and tempeh and seitan and lots and lots of things. Even green veg is quite reasonably high in protein. Some grains like quinoa. For me, these are the kind of things I'm eating all the time at the moment because I'm trying to build a bit of muscle. So I have like a salad every day with beans in it and quinoa. I put chia seeds in my porridge in the morning. And you can also get vegan protein shakes. So I'm having a vegan protein shake at the moment. And then my other tip is just like, especially if you're doing endurance training, like when I've done marathons and triathlons in the past, if you've been training in the morning, then you are going to get really hungry later in the day. So I would just say, like, have loads of snacks on you at all times. Things like dried fruit and nuts and things like that are stuff that I quite like to snack on. But if you've done a big run, you should also like just pig out on chocolate as well, I think. Like just be kind to yourself. Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of advice I want to hear. Yeah, and I fully back up the tracker bit. I recently tracked my nutrition for a week just out of pure curiosity, and I was getting enough protein, but less than I would have guessed. So I've added a protein shake to my diet because I have been exercising a lot, and I do notice a difference in terms of recovery. So yeah, I think anyone, vegan or not, it's important to kind of know where you're at and make sure that you're ticking all the boxes.
Right.
Yeah. So I hear lately more and more athletes going vegan. You see headlines a lot in the US about NBA players, Olympic athletes that are trying a plant-based diet. What about in the UK? Are there any sports groups and resources people should check out?
Well, yeah, on that, I mean, there's a film on Netflix that most people have heard of now because it had a big fanfare when it came out, called The Game Changers, and that is all about this subject of sports people turning to vegan diets and why plant-based diets are good for sports performance. So check that out. I believe there's a sequel coming to The Game Changers as well. So we've got more to come on that. In the UK, we do have some quite well-known vegan sports groups. So Vegan Runners is a really big one. And if anyone takes part in marathons or half marathons or 10Ks, you see people running with Vegan Runners t-shirts on, which is quite exciting. And it's a really lovely group. I've been a member of Vegan Runners in the past. So it's a really great group. But there's also cycling groups, there's vegan hiking groups, there's all sorts of things. So, do a Google search, do a search on Facebook, that sort of thing. You'll probably find them. There's also some sports teams that you can follow. There's a football team in the UK called Forest Green Rovers, who are completely plant-based, and a rugby team called Green Gazelles. So yeah, how about do you have any vegan sports teams in the US?
I know of a lot of individual athletes. I am not aware of any fully vegan teams, but I would love to know if you're out there listening and you know one. Shoot us an email and let us know.
Okay, Wendy, I think it's time for us to introduce our guest for today's podcast. Dale Vince is the chairman and owner of the world's first vegan football club, Forest Green Rovers. Dale is an entrepreneur and has been at the forefront of the renewable energy and electric car industry since the early 90s, and he eventually established the energy company Ecotricity. And you weren't available to speak to Dale the day we interviewed him, were you, Wendy? So you'll just hear my voice and Dale's. Okay, here we go. Dale, welcome to the Veganuary podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today. I want to leap straight in and ask you a question we ask all our guests, and that is, what is your dream vegan plant-based meal?
Well, I don't have one really. I like a bunch of different things, but favorites, well, that would be like the Forest Green burger, the Big Dunk, which is something we made specially for a previous manager. And it's from our Devil's Kitchen. It's a shiitake mushroom burger, all made with plants, low saturated fat, low salt, super healthy. We stick it in a special bun at the club. I stick it in a sourdough bun myself. That's one of my favorite foods. I'm famously a fan of chips. That's a favorite food. But, I just like to eat vegan food. Not the kind of modern dirty vegan food.
Yeah.
Which is loaded with fat and salt and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's like a fast food thing, I guess. Not that so much, but just food made with plants, right? It doesn't get better than that. Yeah. Salads. I love salads with seeds and nuts and tahini and olive oil and balsamic. And I just love plants.
Excellent. I'm salivating. I always start salivating with that question. We're going to come on to talk about Forest Green Rovers in a minute, but I've been reading your book Manifesto, and you talk about how kind of the food that was there served in the stadium was not great before you switched over, but how important it was for you to make sure that the food that was available was really, really, really good. And that's kind of a principle that you talk about in the book, is making sure that when you launch these things, whatever it is, that they're kind of like, they match up to the non-green version, I guess. That's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, the conventional version, you could call it, I suppose. And I've learned that over the years, really, that's important. When we designed and built Britain's first electric car, we started in 2008. There were none in the world. And it was a simple thought, really. There's no point building a car that people are going to say yes, but to. Yes, it's electric, but so we built a supercar with incredible performance and handling and looks, so that there were no buts about this car. In Forest Green later, in Forest Green food, for example, we replaced animal products on the menu, and we just wanted to do it with great food, so that people didn't say yes, but our pitch, our organic football pitch wins awards. It's not organic, shrug, but do you know what I mean? It's great. And that's just, I think that's the way it has to be, because we've got to generally, in terms of persuading millions of people to live differently so that we can get to net zero and just live a more sustainable life, we've got to persuade them it's not about giving stuff up. We've got to show them it's not about giving stuff up. Yeah. That's what's at the core of that.
Brill. I'd love to find out in the book. So I've been really, as you can tell, I feel like I'm showing off that I've read the book. But you talk about how much you believe in vegan diets as a way to live sustainably. But I wasn't sure where in the timeline you were introduced to vegan food. I know you started off with living this kind of alternative traveling lifestyle. Was it there that you were first introduced to vegan food, or did it come later?
No, it was there. So I was a vegetarian from the day I left home. I never bought meat and that kind of stuff, but I did still have dairy in my life. And then living on the road, I would have been probably 20, something like that, maybe 21. And I was just exposed to information about, about the other side of the, that industry, not the meat, but the dairy side, eggs, that kind of stuff. And it just seemed obvious to me that those things were bad also, for all the reasons that meat is bad, and had to be given up. And so it was a very short step, really, for me, from being vegetarian to being vegan.
And do you remember if it was something you found difficult or challenging, or because it felt so natural and right, was it quite easy?
Well, I've never liked milk, so never drunk that. I guess I was eating cheese and eggs. Probably they were the two things. And I mean, eggs, right? What are they? When you think about where they come from and what they actually are, we describe them as eggs as if they're some kind of, sanitized, nutritious thing that we find. But it's a chicken's period, right?
Yeah.
And factory farming, I became aware of that, and that's so abhorrent. There's no connection in most people's everyday lives between what they find on the shelf of a shop and how it's procured.
Mm-hmm.
We disconnect from that. But once you see it, then it's hard. You can't in good conscience eat that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think anyway. And I've always believed that eating animal bodies was going to be harmful, that it had to be harmful because you were eating every aspect of them, all of their diseases and illnesses, as well as, the stuff I later learned to be bad, like saturated fats and that kind of stuff, all of the hormones, everything that drives that animal. You eat it, you take it inside yourself. And you become it, it becomes part of you. And that never felt right to me. I always felt wrong. I mean, meat is a decaying substance from the minute the animal is killed, right? That's that way. We all know this, right? Some of us, well, I don't know. I say we all know this. I assume we all know this, but, I'm going to shut up now.
No, great. I mean, so when you started off talking about eggs, so many people who've spoken to me on this podcast have talked about how queasy eggs make them. And even I, used to eat eggs, and I used to think this is kind of gross, but I was still eating it. And then, you switch to plant-based, to vegan.
You do. And when I say to people that chicken periods really aren't they? I mean, people look at me like I'm just outrageous.
Yeah.
What are you saying? But actually, they can't deny it, right? Nobody ever says, well, no, they're not, That's what they are.
So I wanted to ask you, so you started life living on this kind of off-grid, alternative traveller community, and then you've since come to be an entrepreneur, a businessman. I guess I'm interested in what lessons you felt you learned from that earlier part of your life that you then brought and applied to the business world. Are there any kind of through threads that you see?
Well, I know that when I dropped back in 10 years later, I felt like a very resilient person, very self-sufficient from that experience of being on the road and doing everything for myself. Being on the road does, I think, teach you that, give you that. And that made me, I guess, even more confident than I might naturally be, that I could just do whatever I wanted to do. I really felt that. And I was taking on a big challenge because I dropped back in with no money or training or anything in the field of renewable energy. And, with the aim of building a big windmill on the hill I was living on. And, I had literally nothing to help me on that journey, but I wasn't daunted by that. Spent, as you see in my book, like 5 years achieving that goal, but learning everything along the way. I just was a super positive, self-confident person, I guess, because I'd actually, when I lived my first winter outside of a house, which is how it used to be referred to. It's an odd concept when you think about it, because we're all used to being in houses and they provide a certain level of support and sustenance that you probably take for granted.
Yeah.
But when you don't have it, when you first live in some woods, in a trailer or a bus or something, in the winter when it gets dark at 4 o'clock, and if you haven't collected whatever you need for the night, then really you're in a bit of a problem. You need water and wood and food maybe. It just teaches you great self-reliance. Also, connection to the seasons, aware of the changing lengths of the day and the changing climate. And the weather affects you much more when you live outdoors than to when you live in a house in a street.
Yeah, interesting. Something an observation of mine is that there's it kind of gives you an ability to break the rules a little bit. I felt there's a bit early on where you get in some sort of trouble with the police, and they give you a sheet, but they haven't ticked all the boxes, and so you go into the police station and there's nothing they can do. And then later on, you're having a meeting with like Tesla or something, and Tesla tried to bug the meeting. It seemed to me that there was a kind of parallel in the way that you were able to because you were living kind of outside the system, you were able to see the way that the system operates and tries to trick people to a degree. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it might not be so much as seeing that aspect of the system, so much as being used to being like an outsider, an outlaw.
Yeah.
And just having to break the rules by accident, really, just happened to me. And having no fear, actually, about going against norms and conventions and that kind of stuff.
Love it. So I wondered if you could give us a potted history of how Ecotricity came about. Really, I know it is quite, it's quite a long story, but
no, it's easy. It's easy. I've done it many times.
Oh, go for it then.
So I dropped back in from a 10-year traveling lifestyle in 1990. I was living on a hill outside Stroud, had a little windmill powering my trailer, so I was familiar with renewable energy to that extent. It powered the lights in my trailer. And I saw the first windmills built in Cornwall. I thought, actually, I could spend another 10 years living a low-impact lifestyle personally, or I could drop back in and try and build a big windmill on this hill. And I knew it was windy because I had a little windmill. And I thought that, I knew that the way we made electricity was the biggest single cause of the climate crisis in our country. And I thought it makes sense to start there, try and change the way we make electricity in Britain, which is a grand ambition, right? Mm-hmm. For a hippie in a trailer on a hill. And it started there. And I spent the next 5 years learning everything about wind energy, about grid connections, about planning permissions and environment impact statements and business plans and finance and construction. And I went through that whole process and built the first windmill in 1996. It was on Friday the 13th of December, which is a great date. And I had a blueprint to do more. I'd broken an awful lot of kind of new ground in the process that I thought I need to build more. I never expected to, but I thought I need to build more, need a fair price for the energy to do that. Went to see the local energy company. They laughed at the idea of green energy. They were a monopoly buyer. They offered a rubbish price. And I left that meeting and said, you know what? I need to form an energy company. Mm-hmm. It was just possible. Thatcher had liberalized the industry. I got 2 or 3 sheets of paper form from Ofgem, the regulator, filled them in, faxed them to Ofgem with no real business plan or money or anything, and got a license to be an energy supplier. Spent 12 months studying the grid and how it works in our country, came up with a new concept of embedded supply, matching local generators to local users. And a year after forming the company in 1995, began the first supply of green energy anywhere in the world on the 1st of April 1996. And it was a local college that bought energy from a local wind landfill site. And that's how it began. And then we had a series of building windmills in innovative places. We built Britain's first megawatt scale one, first commercial one, that kind of stuff. Britain's first solar project in 2010 at grid scale. Brought green gas to Britain in 2010 as well. Just this summer, we built our first gas mill, which uses grass to make gas for the grid. And somewhere in the early 2000s, broadened our horizons from energy as the biggest source of carbon emissions to include transport and food, because they were the second and third biggest, respectively. Mm-hmm. And between all three, they make 80% of everybody's personal carbon footprint, which for me is a simple, empowering message. We spend our money every day in these 3 areas of life: how we power ourselves, how we travel, and what we eat, and we can change the way the world goes around through our spending decisions. And then I spent the next couple of decades pursuing solutions in all of those, like the electric car, the electric highway, which is a national network of charging points, food through Forest Green Rovers initially, then the Devil's Kitchen. We make school dinners. We're in 1 in 4 English primary schools right now with our plant-based food, for example, which we also have at Forest Green, and some other stuff like making diamonds from atmospheric carbon, launched an electric airline last summer, and some other stuff.
It's an absolutely amazing story. Have you ever sold the film rights? Have you ever had any interest in the film rights?
From time to time, people say, well, you should make a film, that kind of stuff. But nothing more serious. Right now, somebody is pitching a series about me and Forest Green and everything else that I do to whoever will listen. We'll see if they do or not. I can't say I'm bothered. It's best when you're not bothered.
Yeah. So Ecotricity is the only energy company certified by the Vegan Society. And I guess when I first learned about Ecotricity, I was kind of surprised to learn that animal products were even used in the generation of energy. So could you explain what vegan energy is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's shocking and disgusting at the same time. And we kind of we were aware that it happened with gas, that animal body parts were being used, being broken down to make gas, to burn, to make electricity. We knew that, and we avoided that stuff like since day one, and it's kind of in our policy. But it was a few years ago now that we read of fish farms in Scotland sending their carcasses to somewhere to make gas again for electricity and stuff, and it became a kind of we could see at that point it was a bigger industry than we had realized, and we audited our supply chain for electricity and gas. We checked all of our suppliers, had them declare that they didn't use those products in the making of it, and spoke to the Vegan Society and said, look, we've got vegan we can with confidence say there are no animal products in our energy supply. Can we get vegan certification? Because we figured there's an awful lot of people that take it some degree and quite often an awful lot of care about what they eat to exclude animal products. And then unknown to them, they're flicking a switch and there's animal products powering their home, which is a hideous thought. And so we thought we did all of this work in order to be able to say with confidence, there's none of that here. We'd never bought it knowingly, but we made sure that we weren't buying it unwittingly. Great.
So you've been at the forefront of the renewable energy sector and electric cars too. I'm interested to know how optimistic you are about the future of green energy and transport. Are you excited about it? Do you think there's, how many challenges do you think there are to overcome before we can all adopt electric cars?
Look, I'm super optimistic. If you look at green energy, we have all the technology we need. It's now more economic to build renewable energy than fossil fuels. We get twice as many jobs, twice the GDP growth, and we get proper energy security, and we can keep our bills low and make them low and keep them there, because we can be disconnected from the global fossil fuel markets, which drove the energy crisis. So in terms of energy, everything we need, we have. In terms of electrification of transport, the electric car revolution is well underway, not just in Britain, but globally. Buses are on the road. 98% of buses on the road in China are electric already. HGVs are coming out of R&D, and we just launched the world's first electric airline. We'll be in the air with hydrogen-powered planes about 18 months from now, something like that. So the electrification of transport is also completely possible. You can't not be optimistic about that. In food, it's a simple choice, isn't it? I think in terms of energy, transport, food. In food, it's about not eating animals. And we know that if we all did that globally, we could free up 75% of the world. But, an area as big as India, China, the US, and Europe combined, we can give back to wildlife because animal diets are so inefficient. Across all three, we have all the technology. The economics are on our side. The people are on our side. There's one thing we don't have, and that's a government that gets in and does something about it.
I wanted to ask you about Forest Green Rovers next. So I know in the book you say that really football wasn't a part of your life growing up. And then you get this kind of call, I guess. Can you help bail out Forest Green Rovers? So, I just want to know how you went about establishing the world's first vegan football club, and how you did it.
Yeah, so as a kid, I was mad for football, but growing up, I didn't have a team, and once I was a teenager, I went in another direction. But as a kid, I used to play it all day, every day. I loved it, and I still had the love for football for England. When Forest Green did call me up and say, we're a local football club, we're in a bit of a pickle. Can we talk? And then that was the beginning of what turned into a rescue mission of a club on the verge of bankruptcy and relegation, 120 years old, big part of this local community. And I didn't want to run a football club, but they said if I didn't, it would fold. And so I shrugged and said, well, how hard can it be, right? And he said, yes.
Which seems like that's your approach to a lot of things.
Well, that's true. That is true. And, I did it without a plan. And that is also my approach to a lot of things. And day one, I found that the club was serving, therefore I was serving red meat to our players. It was a mince lasagna or something. And I got the manager and the chef together and said, we have to stop this. And they agreed, and we did it on day one. The Sun called it the red meat ban and tried to sensationalize it. We lent into that because what else are you going to do? And it gave us a platform to then talk about what's wrong with animal diets, particularly in the context of sport and performance. And then we've used that angle ever since. I mean, we're still famous for being a vegan club, still the only one in the world. FIFA and the United Nations call us the greenest football club in the world because we didn't just change food, we changed everything about the club. And we've got a global fan base in 20 different countries of the world now. people that are either football fans or environment fans that have come together and support Forest Green. And I like to say that we have just created a new kind of football club where we've put the environment and football on an equal footing in the DNA of the club. We've created a new kind of football fan as well. And our fans are changing their lives. They've gone veggie, vegan. They buy electric cars, solar panels. They tell me about it all of the time, how much has changed their life. And so they've gone from like, looking at us like this, like, what are you doing, to like having completely embraced this green agenda that we've shown them. And we've not preached to them or anything like that or told them what to do. We've just done it ourselves and said, look, this is what we believe in. And this is how and why. And just kind of, showed them what they could do themselves.
Yeah, and it feels like it's the diet thing, the vegan thing that kind of hooked, especially kind of press. When people like to talk about Forest Green Rovers, that's the thing they like to talk about, is the food. Why do you think it's the food and not all the other things that you're doing that hooks people so much?
I mean, it's a good question. First, I think it's a wonderful gift. The simple fact that even now, when the press come to our club for the first time, and they come from all over the world, the first thing they want to talk about, really the only thing, is food, right? The reason, I think, is that it's an improbable combination: football and plant-based eating, veganism, whatever it is. You've got compassion and care about the environment and animals on the one side, you've got football, right? And people don't think that they mix. You can't. People still say to me from other clubs, how can you have a vegan menu at your club without having a riot among your fans? This is what puts other people off from doing it. They think the fan reaction will be angry and it's going to be a problem. And we didn't find that. But it's that improbable combination of the environment, ultimately bigger picture, and football, but specifically food.
Interesting. And being in football, it kind of gives you an opportunity to reach an audience that you possibly wouldn't otherwise, do you think? Absolutely.
It's a new audience. And early doors, when I rescued the club, that was a realization that we wouldn't be preaching to the choir, right? It would be a difficult audience, is what some people said. But that made it more appealing, right? That made it more worthwhile, because we've got to talk to other people in other walks of life and with other outlooks. There's no point us just talking amongst ourselves. And so that was an appealing part of the mission. And it's gone so incredibly well. And what I would say we've discovered is that football fans are just like normal people, shock horror. You show them a problem and you show them an answer and they understand it.
Yeah. And it brings us back sort of kind of to what we talked about at the top of the podcast, this idea of being outside and inside the system. I think, as you say, so often we, in this environmentalist world, we have a bit of an issue of preaching to the choir. It's really important to try and get ourselves beyond our echo chamber, I guess.
So we're eco chamber in our case.
I like that. So unusually for an entrepreneur, you're not really driven by money. So what does drive you?
Change. The chance to bring change to the world, actually just literally to make the world a better place, which sounds like a grand ambition, but it is that. And, I chose energy as the biggest driver of the climate crisis, which is the biggest threat that we've ever faced as a species. I chose that as a starting place, moved into transport and food as the second and third biggest, and our mission has broadened a little bit more than that. Nature is a consequence of these actions. If we tackle energy, transport, food, we free up vast areas of land to bring wildlife back to our planet. We clean up the air, the water, the food that we eat, just to make life a better experience and the world a better place. That's the motivation.
Great. And very motivating to hear as well. I'm going to finish with a silly question. We've been asking this to everyone. So the theme of Veganuary this year is called Vote for Veggies. And we're saying, politicians aren't acting, so we need to act by eating veggies and creating the change that we want to see. So we're asking all our guests to nominate a favourite vegetable, something that you like to cook or eat.
It's easy. It's the potato.
Nice.
I love them. Chipped, mashed, baked, you name it.
We spoke to Deborah Meaden, and she chose the potato as well. So good company.
Which is harsh on all the other veg, right? Because there's an amazing array of veg out there in the world to eat, and you don't encounter it unless and until you go veggie or vegan. I think, as a rule, right? Food is quite samey, but there's some awesome plants out there to eat.
Brill, well, it's been lovely to speak to you. Thanks for your time and thanks for being on the Veganuary podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks very much. See you later.
Should we eat?
Let's eat.
Let's eat. So you tasked me this week with cooking an American staple, the corn dog. I've never had a corn dog before. You were telling me that different American cities have like their own special hot dog. Is that right?
They do. Yeah, so there's the Chicago dog, which has pickles on it. That looks like it came out great.
It came out pretty well.
It's like, yeah, it's a handsome corn dog.
So which city is the corn dog related to?
I don't tend to associate corn dog with a particular city. I think of it more as like a street fair food.
Okay. So you get a hot dog and you put it on a skewer. So I use Fry's vegan hot dogs, and you make a batter from corn meal and milk, and I think usually you'd use eggs, but I use a flaxseed egg thing. And then you are supposed to deep fry it, but I wasn't brave enough I'm scared of deep frying at home. So I just shallow fried it, which I think is why it's got a bit of a funny shape. But I'm pretty excited about it. I think it looks quite good. And it's like a lollipop because it's on a stick. Okay.
What do you think?
That's really good.
Now, normally you would dip it in like a little bit of mustard or ketchup. You're just going in.
It's a bit dry.
Yeah.
Also, it's because I made it this morning. It's a bit cold now, but I can imagine when it's straight out the fryer.
Yeah.
And it's
nice
really
and
crispy and nice. I can imagine that's really good. I actually, as a bonus, I've got a can of root beer to wash it down with. I've never had root beer before, so
You never have had root beer?
I don't think so. What is it?
Oh, it's such a staple here.
Is it made from beetroots?
No. I don't even know what it is, to be honest. It's just a interesting herbal cola. So yeah, I'll be curious to see what you think. It's quite sweet.
Tastes like cough syrup.
I am in the same camp with you, to be honest. It's not my favorite, but
I quite like it.
Yeah, it's pretty beloved here.
Okay, so what did you make from my list this week?
So I made what you've told me is a little bit of an old school British treat, which is coronation chicken salad.
Yes.
But I've made a vegan version that uses chickpeas instead of chicken, and everything looks a bit bad in the lighting of my podcast studio. Though I will say, not to perpetuate stereotypes, but this is a pretty beige dish.
Yeah,
so
it is.
It doesn't photograph well, but it smells amazing. I think maybe if I made it again, I'd add a little bell pepper, a little parsley, give it a little bit of color.
Nice.
But this one has curry. It has sultanas, which I didn't know what they were. I had to Google. Golden raisins is what we would call them here.
Yeah. This is something that I ate a lot when I was a kid. It's really nice.
I'm going to be honest. That's awesome. I will definitely make that again.
It's one of my favorite things.
Yum.
It was invented to celebrate the Queen's coronation, I guess sometime in the 70s. So it's seen as quite a kitsch, a sort of old-fashioned thing to eat, I think now. It's not very trendy. You wouldn't get it served up to you in Shoreditch or somewhere in London like that. But
I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about the raisins or the sultanas in there, but it's a nice, sweet little bite. 10
good.
out of 10.
It's hit with both successes, corn dogs and coronation chickpeas. Okay, so as the theme of Veganuary this year is vote for veggies, we're continuing on our vegetable leaderboard. I've got my oven glove on, and I'm going to dip my gloved hand into the bag of vegetables. Here we go.
Very exciting. What are we getting into this week?
Okay, this is going to be interesting. It's I can't even remember what it is. It's a doody, I think, pronounce it, or a laukin, or a bottle gourd. So I have no idea what this is, but I went to my local supermarket. In this area that I live in, there's quite a lot of people who have emigrated from Pakistan and India. There's like a big Asian population. So our supermarkets stock a lot of Asian-friendly vegetables. So I think that's what this is. And I looked it up, and it's very popular in curries. People put it in dals, things like that. So I think it must be a bit like a squash or a pumpkin. Have you come across this before?
Yeah. I'm going to have to do some research.
So it seems like whatever the next vegetable we pull out of the bag is going to be a dead cert to make it onto the leaderboard, since neither of us is very familiar with this one. So let's see what we've got. Here we go. I should have brought 2 over gloves. I needed two hands for this. It's a cauliflower.
Tough competition.
Are you a fan of a cauliflower?
Oh, yeah. I mean, what can't cauliflower do, right? It can be pizza crust. It can be buffalo wings. It can be mashed potatoes. Love a cauliflower.
Cauliflower pizza crust. I've never heard of that. That sounds good.
Yeah, actually, you can buy that in a lot of grocery stores in the U.S. It's quite popular at the moment for a low-carb option.
So my first thought is cauliflower cheese, which I love. And I really enjoy making a cheese sauce, a vegan cheese sauce from cashews. And you blitz them up with some stock, put in a bit of nutritional yeast, pour that over your cauliflower, stick it in the oven. Delicious. So I'm voting cauliflower.
I've never had a cauliflower cheese. You're going to have to send me that
Have you
recipe.
not?
I've not.
Oh, is that not a US thing then? Cauliflower cheese? Because it's like mac and cheese, very similar to mac and cheese.
Oh, it's cheese sauce on cauliflower.
Yeah.
No, that's not something I've come across. I thought you were saying you blended the cauliflower into a cheese. Gotcha. Yeah.
Well, next time you're here, I'm going to make you some.
Deal. This is a tricky one because I'm so intrigued by this duty bottle gourd. I really want to try it. I don't want to discount it just because it's unfamiliar.
That's true.
So I think I'm going to go with a curveball and vote for bottle gourd.
Well, do you know what? On that basis, I'm going to vote for a bottle gourd as well. So there we go.
Right.
It's on the lead. It's on the leaderboard. And then maybe I'll even go home tonight and cook something with it. Well, you've been listening to the Veganuary podcast, which was recorded in Distorted Podcast Studios and produced by Jim Moore at Bloody Vegan Productions. If you enjoyed it, please do rate and subscribe. Ideally, rate us 5 stars if you would. If you want to contact us, you can email us at podcast@veganuary.com. And of course, you'll find Veganuary across all the usual social media websites.
You can take part in Veganuary by signing up at veganuary.com to receive 31 daily emails filled with hints, tips, and recipes which introduce you to a vegan diet. It doesn't have to be January. You can sign up anytime.
Brill, thanks for listening. See you later.
1, 2,